Hi and welcome back to the channel. For today's tutorial, we'll be making an inbuilt corset with Modesty panel. Please stick to the end of the video and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. So I've gone ahead and I marked my shoulder to bust, shoulder to under bust, shoulder to waist, and my top length. So the top length for the front is 22 inches. You can go ahead and make yours 24 if you're much taller. So from there, the next thing I will do is to mark my neck width and neck depth. So I'm making use of the standard neckline, which is 3 by 3 inches. While sewing, I extended my neck to 3.5 by 4 because it was a bit tight. So at this point, I'll advise you to extend yours. So after marking out my neck, I'm going to mark my shoulder divided by 2, which gives me 7, and I'll be adding half inch, which is 7.5, because I'm attaching sleeve. So from that point, I'm going to go down by 1 inch. At that 1 inch point, I'm going to place my ruler and I'll connect it to my neckline, drawing my shoulder slant. From my shoulder slant, I'm going to place my tape and I'll mark my chest line. To get your chest line is your bust divided by 6 plus 1.5. At the chest line, I'm going to mark my shoulder divided by 2 plus that half, and I'm going to connect it. The reason why I'm doing this so that I will have a straight line. After connecting it, what I'm going to do is place my tape and find the middle of my armhole. At that point, I'm going to go in by half. After going in by half, I'm going to place my French curve and I'm going to draw my armhole curve. So if you don't have a French curve, you can also make use of a freehand sketch. It's not compulsory to draw it with a French curve. After drawing my armhole curve, the next thing I'm going to do is to use my marker and I'm going to outline my armhole so that it will be very visible. The next step I'm going to take is to place my tape at my chest line, and I'm going to mark my nipple to nipple or bust span measurement divided by 2, which gives me 3.5. So I'm going to mark that at my chest line. After marking it at my chest line, I'm going to mark it at my bust point, at my under bust, at my navel or waistline, and I will go ahead and mark it at my top length. After marking my nipple to nipple or bust span, I'll go ahead and place my ruler and I'm going to connect the marks that I have made. At the chest line, I went up by 1 inch, so you can mark 1.5. I did that because my bust is smaller. The next step is to mark my dart intake. At my under bust, I'll be marking 1 inch at both sides. At my waistline, I'll be marking 1 inch at both sides. After marking that 1 inch, I'm going to place my ruler. I'm going to connect the dart from one side of my under bust to my waist, and then also outline it with my marker so that it will be very visible. On the other side, I'm going to connect the dart from the under bust to the waist. Then I'm going to connect it back to the top length and also do so at the other side. So after drawing my dart, the next is to draw my curve. So I'm going to place my French curve. From my bust point, I'm going to trace it down to my under bust. After doing this for the other bust, I'm going to go to the other side and I will place my French curve, and I will do exactly the same at the other side. I'll take my tape and at my chest line, I'm going to be going down by half inch. So you can decide to leave yours at your chest line, but I'm going to come down by half inch. So after coming down by half inch, I'm going to go in by half. So I'm going to draw a line connecting the half inch I came down with and the half inch I came in with at that point. After drawing it out, I'm going to take my French curve and I will place it touching my under bust to that half inch I came in with, and I'm going to draw my cup at this point. So after drawing that line, the next thing I'm going to do is to place my French curve from that 1 inch I came up with at my chest line down to the ½ inch I came down from, forming my cup at this side. So at this point my cup is ready at this part, so we'll be working on the next cup. So for the other side of the cup, I'm going to place my tape and I'll mark my bust circumference divided by 4. After marking my bust circumference divided by 4, and from that my bust point, I'm going to be going in by 1 inch. So if you don't want your cup to be smaller, you can divide what you have at that point into 2. Then I'll connect my cup down at the under bust, but before I do that, at my chest line I'm going to be coming down by ½ inch. So from that ½ inch I'll be connecting it to my under bust. So I'll go ahead and I'll place my French curve and I'm going to draw my cup at this point. So after drawing my cup, the next thing I'll do is to also place my French curve and connect it from that point to the bust pan at the center. So the next thing I'll do is to mark my bust tightening on top. So at my nipple to nipple point or bust pan, I'm going to mark 1 inch on this side, and I'm also going to mark 1 inch on the other side of the cup. So from there I'll place my French curve and I'm going to connect it, drawing my dart or bust tightening at the upper part of the bust. So at this point I'm going to take my marker and I will mark out all that I have drafted so far. So at this point, if you find my video very interesting and educative, please like, share and subscribe to my YouTube channel, and don't forget to turn on the notification button to get new updates from my channel. And also leave your comments at the comment section or any topic you would like me to share with you on the channel. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to extend that ½ inch we came down from at the chest line. After marking that, I'm going to be measuring my body circumference. So at the bust point, I'm going to place my tape and I'll mark my bust divided by 4 and I'm going to mark. After marking out that, I'm going to measure the ½ inch I have at that intake at the bust and I'll mark the 2 inches sewing allowance. Coming down to my under bust, I'm going to mark the under bust circumference divided by 4 and I'm going to measure the dart intake I have at that point and I'm going to mark. After marking that, I'll be marking 2 inches sewing allowance at that point. After that, I'll go down to my waist. So at my waist, I won't be marking exactly my waist circumference. I'll be minusing 2 inches at that point. So my waist is 28 minus 2, I have 26. 26 divided by 4, I have 6.5, and I'll mark the dart intake. After marking the dart intake, I'll go ahead and mark the sewing 2 inches sewing allowance. Then going down to my top length, I'm going to be marking my hip circumference divided by 4 and I'll mark the 2 inches sewing allowance. After marking my hip measurement and the allowance there, I'm going to draw a freehand sketch connecting my bust to my under bust, down to my waist length, and then down to the hip point. So you can make use of your ruler and your French curve, or you can just draw a freehand sketch. So after doing that, I'm just going to take my marker and I'll outline what I have at this point. Going back to my pattern, I'm just going to blend my armhole down to the new armhole line that I have created. So the reason why I'm doing this is to create more ease at the armhole, and it's very optional. The next step is to tighten our yoke area. So I will mark what I have left at my shoulder and I'm going to divide it into 2. After dividing it into 2, I'll go ahead and mark. So from that point I made, I'm going to connect it down to the mark I made above the chest line.
So I'll just use my pencil and I will connect the line. So that we took out to tighten the bust area, we are going to extend it back to that line, so that our by the time we are done drafting, our dart will be the same, our yoke will be the same with the corset area or the body of the dress. So you're going to blend it in this way. At the down part of my pattern, I'll be placing my tape this way and I'll measure 2 inches upwards. After measuring 2 inches upwards, I'm going to place my French curve and I'm going to draw a line. I'm going to make use of my marker to draw the line. And I will draw a curve connecting it to my top length. So with this, my pattern for the front is ready and I'm going to go ahead and I will cut it out. So after cutting out, I'm going to be blending my yoke for the upper part this way. After blending it, I'm just going to make sure my neckline of the corset part outlines. I'll just use a pencil and draw it out. Then I'm going to tape it down with a paper tape. After taping it down, I'm just going to cut out that little part that I blended out. After cutting it out, I'll be going over to draft the back pattern. So for my back pattern, I've marked out all my vertical measurements: my shoulder to bust, my shoulder to under bust, my shoulder to waist, and my shoulder to top length. So for my top length at the back, I'm making use of 20 inches because I prefer my back pattern to be shorter. And I marked out the normal standard 3x3 neckline, and I marked my armhole. So the next thing I'm going to do is to place my tape and I'm going to mark my body circumference. So at my bust point, I'm going to mark my bust divided by 4 plus 2 inches sewing allowance. At the under bust, I'm going to mark my under bust circumference divided by 4 plus 2 inches sewing allowance. Then coming over to my waistline, I minus 2 inches from the front. I'll also do that for my back waistline, and I'm going to mark 2 inches for sewing allowance. So at the hip, at the top length, I'm going to mark my hip circumference divided by 4 plus 2 inches sewing allowance. So for my back, I won't be making use of a dart. So what I will do is to place my front pattern on my back pattern and make sure my hip side corresponds. So after doing that, I'm just going to take my pencil and I'll connect the marks that I have made so far. So I'm just going to use my French curve at this point and I'll just adjust the line at my my top length. That top length, I'll just be going in by ½ inch a bit, and I'll go ahead and I'll blend out or draw out my lines with a marker. And also remember, for the front pattern, we went down by ½ inch at the armhole, so I'll be going down at ½ inch at my back armhole or chest line also, and I'm going to connect. After connecting, I'm going to draw out my armhole curve so that it will be very visible. So I'll place my tape at this point and I'm going to mark 2 inches at my chest line. So coming down to my waistline, I'm also going to mark 2 inches and down at my top length. After marking the 2 inches, I'm going to place my ruler and I'll connect. So this part will be serving as my modesty panel because I don't want much opening at my pattern. If you watch most of my tutorial, you will notice I don't like much opening at my back pattern. Next step is to connect the line from my neckline down to my chest line. So after drawing the line, the upper part will be serving as my yoke for this pattern, and I'm going to cut out this other part. And from my chest line down to my waistline, this will serve as my modesty panel. So whatever I have here, I'll be cutting it by 2 because
we are assuming this pattern is on fold, and I'm going to be adding 1 inch allowance for sewing and also attaching at the back. So I'll go ahead and I will outline this at my yoke. After doing that, I'll go ahead and I will cut out my pattern. So this is my back pattern. Going over to the skirt part, I'm going to insert my waist circumference, and remember we minus 2 from our waist, so I'll be doing that minus waist plus my sewing allowance. Going down, I'll measure 7 inches to get my hip point, and I'll insert my hip circumference and I will mark. Going down, whatever I have at my hip, I'm going to minus 2 inches and I'll mark at the lower part. So I'm going to connect it down to my skirt, to the down part of my skirt. After connecting it, I'll go ahead and I will cut out my pattern. After cutting out my pattern for the back side, I'll be adding 2 inches for zipper allowance. So what I'm going to do right now is to open my pattern. So this is my front pattern and this is what I have. After opening up the pattern for the body, I'm going to open up the pattern for the cup side of the corset. So this is the 2-piece I have for the bra cup side of the corset. And also for this video, I'm going to be making use of a bra foam. So a bra foam is different from a wadding, and I'm going to place the bra foam under each cup of the corset. Then I also cut out lining and gum stay. So whatever I do to the main fabric, I'm going to be doing it to the lining. After placing my patterns, I'll go over to the machine and join it. So I've joined the cup and I also trimmed out the foam bra so that it won't be bulky, and I notched it. So this is what I have, and I also ironed the cup, and at the back I iron gum stay to the lining. So I'll go ahead and I'll iron this, but before I iron it, I'm going to show you how to create a boning channel. First, you're going to sew with half and you're going to flip it this way and you're going to top stitch. So you're going to be doing this from the beginning to the end. First, you're going to sew it, then flip it over and top stitch. Then you're going to create as many boning channel that you want. Going over to the modesty panel, you're going to iron your gum stay to the lining and you're going to sew at the 4 edges of the modesty panel. And you're going to be needing a little space to turn it to the right side. Then for the back yoke, you're just going to sew at this point, because at the other end you'll be attaching sleeve to it, so there won't be any need to sew at those edges. After sewing that part, you're going to be joining it to the down part of the back. So this is my front. I've gone ahead and I have created as many boning channels that I'm working with, and I also created a boning channel at the back. So what I'll do is I'll place my front at the back and I'm going to make sure it aligns. So if I have any excess at the back or at the front, I'm going to trim it off. So I have excess at my hip point at the back and I'm going to trim it off. So what I'll do next is this particular pattern that I have trimmed off, I'm going to place it on the other side of the back, and I'm also going to trim off the excess hip I have at that point. So the reason why I'm doing this is for all my pattern to align and for me not to have excess on any point. After this, I'm just going to keep this aside. Then going over to my front, the next thing I'm going to do is to be attaching my cup to the body of the corset. So before I join my cup, I will make sure this part that I join together is meeting the center of my cup, and from there I'm going to pin it. So if you're having issues sewing it direct, just pin it before attaching your cup. That way it makes it easier.
If you notice the space you have to attach your cup is smaller, all you have to do is notch it. With that way, it will accommodate your cup. So I'll go ahead and I will keep pinning my bra cup to the body. So after pinning it, I'm going to sew it at the sewing machine. Remember, it's optional to pin. If you can sew directly while joining your cup, you can just do that. Going over to my back pattern, I've gone ahead and stitched my yoke. So this is what I have. So I'll be showing you how to join the back part. So to join the back area, I'm going to leave about ½ inch at this point, and I'm going to place my yoke this way. After placing my yoke, you can go ahead and top stitch on it, or you can just pin it down. So I'll go ahead and I'll pin it.
After pinning it down, this is what you're going to have. I'll take the lining part of the back, which I've iron gum stay to, and I'm going to place it on top of it this way, making sure I have that ½ inch at that point at the both side of the ending, just like this, and I'll go ahead and I'll pin it back. So after sewing, you're going to unpin it. So the reason why you're pinning it is for it to be stable, so that it won't shift while joining. So if you're going to use a corset loop, you will be attaching your Modesty panel at this point. You're going to place your Modesty panel this way, and you're going to bring down the other parts of the dress facing it. So it's either you fold in the half and top stitch, or you're going to sew it inside when you're doing the turn up for the back. So this is when you're making a corset loop. So if you're going to use an eyelet, I'm going to be showing you how you'll be doing that, because that's what I'm going to use for this particular video. So if you're making use of an eyelet, after sewing your Modesty panel, you're going to place it underneath your back pattern, and you're going to attach it at the back. So I'll place it and mark about 1 inch inside. So this 1 inch is not constant, so depending on how wide your Modesty panel is, so I'm going to sew on that 1 inch. So sewing on that 1 inch will hold down my Modesty panel, and I'm going to create another ½ inch. So while sewing this ½ inch, I'm going to push my Modesty panel inwards, and I'm going to sew another ½ inch. The first ½ inch I'll be passing a boning. The second part is where my eyelet will be. Moving over to my front pattern, I have attached my cup, and this is what I have at this point. The next step is to attach my yoke to the corset. So for my yoke, I ran a stitch at the neckline. So while sewing it, I pinned it down to avoid my yoke from shifting, since I doubled the net I have at that place. So after unpinning it, I'm going to trim off the excess I have at the neckline. While trimming, you're going to trim close to your stitch in order to give it that invisible look at the neckline. Or if you don't want to double your net, you can just do it single, but you're going to cut it in a very clean way. After you're done, you're going to turn it to the right side. So I have turned it to the right side, and this is what I have at this point. So you're just going to iron it for it to be more relaxed. But before ironing it, I'm going to show you how you're going to attach the net part or the yoke part to the corset. So you're going to pin the center to the center of your corset this way. After pinning the center, you're going to place it, and you're going to continue pinning to the end. So if you're going to have issue while pinning it, it's advisable to run a stitch at the end to hold down the net before pinning it down. So you're going to continue pinning the yoke to the corset part till you get to the end of your dress. So after pinning this part, you're also going to pin the other side of your yoke to your corset. After pinning down the neck, you're going to pin the lining part to the corset also. So you can just stitch your yoke to your corset and then attach this, or you can do it together at once and you're just going to run a stitch. So after joining it, this is what I have. I went ahead and I stitched up the side. So this is the inside of my corset and this is how it is looking, and this is the front part. So, and also this is my back, the back part of my corset, and this is what the Modesty panel is looking like. So what I'll do is just to place the back side to the front side of my corset, and I'm going to make sure that they are of the same length at the side. So if I have any excess, I'm just going to trim it off. After doing this, I'll go ahead and I will join my corset. I'll pass the boning through it, and I'm going to cut an Ankara fabric that I'll use to wrap the edge of my inbuilt corset. So you're going to sew it half this way at the back, and you're going to flip it and then fold in and then top stitch on it round. So I've gone ahead and I've joined my corset, the back to the front, and this is what I have. So the next step is to pass my boning. So I'm making use of a sewable boning. So to avoid my boning from poking, I'm going to cover it with a paper sellotape, and I'll be doing this at the both ends of my boning, of my sewable boning, before inserting it into my boning channel. So another way of doing this is to sew your boning directly to your corset. So I'll be inserting boning to all the boning channels that I have created. After inserting my boning, I'm going to use this Ankara fabric and I'm going to wrap the ending or the edges of my corset just the way I showed you. So I've inserted my boning and I wrapped the edge with an Ankara. So I also attached my sleeve. So I did this off the camera, and this is my Modesty panel, and this is how it's looking, and this is the back part of my corset. So this is how the back of my inbuilt corset is looking. So the next step is to work on the skirt part. So for the back part, I joined my material separately and I joined my lining separately. So after this, I'm going to place my lining this way and I'm going to do the turn up for my lining. So after turning it up, I attach the zip directly to the Ankara fabric and I left the lining open this way. So what I'm going to do is to open up my zip. After opening up my zip, I'm going to be turning it with the lining, so you need to pay attention to see what I'm going to do at this part. So I'm going to take my Ankara, the part I attached my zip, and I'm going to flip my lining this way and I'm going to sew it, so about 3 to 4 inches. So the 3 to 4 inches will be the part that will be on top of your eyelet. So for clarity's sake, I'm just going to show it again. You're going to flip it and you're going to sew it. So after that, I'm going to place my front to the back and I will shape the skirt. So after shaping the skirt, this is what I have. So the next step I'm going to do right now is to find the middle of the skirt. After finding the middle of the skirt, I'm going to notch this part of the skirt, the center of the skirt. After notching that part of the skirt, I'm going to be drawing like a basque shape from that point. I'm going to first of all measure the center to get the center line. I'll draw a line down.
After drawing the line down, I'm just going to place my skirt back, and I'm going to draw like a basque shape. So I don't really want that very V effect, so I'll create a slightly V at the waistline. After doing that, I'll just cut out what I have marked out. After cutting that part of the skirt, I'm going to bring my front. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to place what I cut out from my skirt on the upper part. But before I do that, I'll place my tape at my under bust, and I'm going to find my waist measurement. So I'll be marking my waist measurement on top of the upper part of my dress, because that's where I'm going to be attaching my skirt from. After doing that, I'll go ahead and I'll place what I cut out, and I'm going to draw out the shape. So the reason why I'm doing this is to make sure I have exactly the shape that I have marked out. After drawing it out, then I'll take my skirt and I will attach it to the corset part of my dress. So by the time I'm done sewing, this is what I'm going to have. So there's another method whereby you top stitch your skirt on top of your corset. So that, if you're going to do that, you're going to fold in the finishing line of your skirt, and you're just going to top stitch, and then you're going to cover it with applique. So going over to the machine to attach the skirt part to the corset. So I also extended my waistline close to my boning channel. So you're not going to sew on your boning channel, you're just going to leave that 3 inches or 4 inches you sewed. So you're going to open up your zip this way, and you're going to place your skirt immediately after that 3 to 4 inches you closed, and you're going to place and sew on the machine. So you're carefully going to sew following the line that you have marked out already. So if you're having issues sewing on it, you can easily pin while sewing. So while sewing, if you're getting to the basque part and you're having difficulty while sewing, so you can just stop at the center and then start from the other side of the waist. You can just stop at the center and then start from this other side, and you can as well pin it so that it will be easy for you to sew. So I'll continue sewing till I get to the middle, and I'll bring it out and show you the final look.